Hey, everybody. It's great to be with you this afternoon. One of the ideas we've had recently is to follow up on our sermons. And so it's been a couple days since I preached the sermon about the witnesses God uses in John chapter 4, verses 27 to 38. And we wanted to continue the opportunity for people to think about the sermon and ask questions. And so we've posted it out there on Facebook and a couple other places just to kind of get a few questions, and I would love to answer them. And as you have opportunity down the road, look for follow-up YouTube videos that we can answer some of the questions from the sermon text, and certainly would love for you to dig in and ask more questions. Hopefully, part of what we're doing here is just guiding you to get into the scriptures more and more. So excited to take a few minutes and just talk about the sermon. If you're not familiar with it, just a quick overview is that there is this woman that comes to the well. Jesus is in Samaria, which is unique in and of itself. And Jesus is there, and she sees Jesus, and he asks her for a drink of water, and Jesus offers her living water. And long story short, she accepts Jesus as the Messiah and goes and tells everyone about it. So we zoomed in on a part of the story, which was verses 27 to 38, and it begins with the story of the disciples. So Jesus has been talking with this woman. The disciples have been gone to get lunch. So they appear at the well for the first time, and they see this woman, and they're super surprised that Jesus would be with a woman, and especially a Samaritan. And they didn't say anything about it, and it's unique that they didn't. As you think of these disciples, they had been with Jesus, and he had sent them away to get lunch. And it's like, why were they so preoccupied with what they were doing? And so the context of the story is they had gone away, they were coming back. And, in my opinion, thinking about it, it would have been similar to if somebody had asked us to go get lunch for them. And we have these visions of sitting down and enjoying a nice meal together. So they come back to Jesus, and he is with this woman at the well and having this conversation, which was very strange to them. And they didn't ask a question. They didn't say anything. They were focused on lunch, and Jesus kept bringing them back. In fact, he even said, "I have food to eat that you don't know about." And they heard that, and they thought to themselves, "Did somebody already bring you lunch?" And of course, Jesus was speaking about an eternal answer to their question. And so he continues the conversation, and he tells them a story at the end about the fields and being white to harvest. But the point of this question, I think, is why would they be so preoccupied with what is going on? And I think that's just a part of our humanity. I mean, my answer to that is I feel that a lot, and you might as well, of just having a busy schedule and not realizing that God is trying to provide an opportunity or to move into my life. So the third question is, what gave this woman the courage to share Jesus? And so as the story goes, here is this woman. She is at the well at the middle of the day, probably a day when she didn't want to be around people. And we follow the story, and we see that the people who had rejected her, she had felt isolated from, she goes back to them, and not only goes to them, but tells them that she's found the Messiah. And that's a really big deal. It's a big risk because she's been rejected by them multiple times. And then to offer this to them, she had to have some major change in her life, which would have given her the courage to do that. And just looking through this passage, I think it's the power of clean conscience. And she was with Jesus, and he knew everything about her, and he still loved her. In all of her experiences before then, people began to find things out about her, and they rejected her. Whether it was a relationship with another guy, or it was maybe even another person in her village, maybe it was a family member, they found out these dirty secrets about this woman at the well. And it was finally enough for them to say, "I don't want anything to do with you anymore." And her entire life, she dealt with that rejection. And Jesus knows everything about her and still loves her. And when she recognized that, when she realized that could be a reality, she had to tell everyone about it. It changed her life. And when we come to that same recognition, it changes our life as well. And so the witnesses God uses are individuals who are like the disciples, or maybe unlike the disciples, not as concerned with the temporal as they are with the eternal. And he also uses witnesses who have been changed by the power of the gospel. They understand a clean conscience and forgiveness and being loved in spite of all of the faults and sins that we've committed. And that's a beautiful story of Christianity. One that was asked on our feed of the YouTube video was, do you believe in repentance? And the short answer is yes. And this story is all about repentance. And repentance simply means a changed life. It means to change your direction, to change your way of thinking. And repentance is supernatural. I mean, we can't change ourselves. And so it's a gift from God. And we watch it in this story because there is this woman at the well that had struggled with all sorts of sins. And Jesus changed her, and she repented of her sin. And so that answer is yes. And the final question I have is, what is my all-time favorite Bible verse? And this takes us out of John chapter 4 into Romans 1 and verse 16. I don't know why. It's been something for a long time, probably since college at the very least. I've loved this verse, and it says, Paul is writing, and he says, I am not ashamed of the gospel of God, for it is the power of God into salvation to everyone who believes, the Jew first, and also to the Greek. And I love the fact that he's not ashamed, and I think he's not ashamed because it's changed his life. But then he says the gospel, which is what this woman experienced, the fact that Jesus knows everything about her, loves her anyway, and died for her. This good news and gave her salvation. This good news can change anyone's life, and it's powerful. So, if you are an individual who has struggled maybe with a lifetime of addiction and you feel like I can never change, know that the gospel is powerful enough. If you've lived a boring life and have been a pretty good person, but have never come into a relationship with Christ, the gospel is the power of God to salvation. So I might have to preach a sermon on that someday. But anyway, thanks for checking in, and hopefully next week we'll have some more questions and some more conversation about it. Have a great day.